You are listening to the Innovating Cannabis Podcast, where you will meet entrepreneurs, cultivators, scientists, doctors, and inventors in the cannabis industry.
I'm your host, Pam Schmiel. In addition to producing and hosting this podcast, I'm a freelance writer and journalist. You can find links to my work and contact information in the show notes. Today, our guest is Nick Tanem. He's a true OG in the cannabis extraction space and widely credited with coining the term solventless and pioneering the rosin, resin, and exotic concentrate movement that defines today's market. He's a founding council member and instructor for the Ganjier certification program, travels the world judging cannabis competitions, and shares his knowledge of hash making with the next generation of extractors. In this episode, Nick talks about his company, Essential Extracts, and its premium concentrates available in New Jersey, California, and Colorado. He also shares tips on how to win a cannabis cup, preserving terpenes and other volatile compounds, exploring different extraction methods, blending strains, and his latest project, High Tea. Let's welcome Nick Tanem. Can you just tell us about your brand, Essential Extract? Is this the first product that you've launched, Essential Extracts?
Essential Extracts is the first brand that I've launched into the licensed markets. In fact, we were the first licensed tax-paying hash company in the United States, still are. It took some having to be on the front lines, basically, to get into that position. I had to be very vocal because I was operating in California under 215 days in the early 2000s, and I got into some trouble. I didn't have the protection that I was really looking for. I was still looking over my shoulder. I was still not sleeping at night. So I moved back out to Colorado in 2009. And that's when I really started kind of putting my feet on the ground and working on setting up Essential Extracts. By 2010, we were an LLC. And later that year, we became the first licensed tax-paying hash company. I had to call the Department of Revenue. I had to call the IRS and say, hey, I want to pay taxes on the hash that I'm selling. I'm tired of hiding. I don't want to pay on some DBA and just go some roundabout route like we had been playing with in 215, et cetera. I wanted protection.
Wow, so that was in Colorado?
Yeah, came back to Colorado to really launch Essential Extracts. California gave me a little heat. My products were available on shelves in California under 215, or just a few shelves. But at that point in time, we weren't Essential Extracts yet. It was just me, and we were kind of staying under the radar, if you will.
Right. Just showing up at the dispensaries. Here's the products, and yeah.
Yep.
So, but did you grow up in California or
basically? I did.
Okay, so you grew up in all that.
Grew up in California and blessed to kind of surround myself by like-minded people and people that were supportive of the plant, the culture, and the work behind it.
What is your product exactly? Is it just concentrates? I mean,
Essential Extracts really stands for solventless concentrates and therefore products surrounding the concentrate. So we make everything from cold cured live rosin to fresh pressed live rosin, and I can get into some of these terms a little bit later, to rosin jam. And these are all just consistencies of live rosin made from whole plant, fresh frozen material, mechanically, solventlessly. And then from there, we can manipulate that post-process, and we make live rosin vapes. We also make topicals and edibles. Edibles, everything from gummies to raw chocolate to protein bars. I've really been pushing more of the healthy foods. And I can't eat as much sugar these days. So pushing sugar-free protein bars and stuff of that nature lately on the edible side. But also we've been making capsules. Our OG Essential capsules were available in Colorado's market from around 2011 until 2017. A whole skew of solventless products are developed underneath the Essential Extracts brand.
Okay, I didn't realize that you had that many in the product line. And how many states are you in now?
Right now, we're just operational in New Jersey, California, and Colorado.
Okay, that's
In
pretty big.
Colorado, we were operational as essential extracts for a long time, from 2010 until 2018. And I got into a poor business deal that ended up screwing me and the company over in Colorado, and thus I pivoted to operations in California and Missouri and a few others. Um, right now, we're operational in California under the Nicotine brand, which is more of my personal R&D brand, and that's available in Colorado with limited release drops.
Okay. Wow, that's okay, that's amazing.
As the
Um,
market shifts, so do I. I have to pivot and really focus on the emerging markets, but still be relevant in some of the saturated markets. And the way that I've done that is limited release drops as well as licensing deals.
yeah, so I mean, I'm sure California and Colorado, like their consumers are mature as far as concentrates and things like that. But how's the New Jersey market shaping up? So
It
what products are you
it's great.
selling?
In Jersey right now, we're just selling cold cure rosin and all-in-one live rosin vapes. Just those two SKUs right this moment, but every day we're working on new sources. The market is still immature, so it's harder for me to find the exact source material, as I'm not vertical in New Jersey. And I'm not trying to put out anything subpar. So oftentimes there's a little bit of a lag in the drops, and there might be some sold out situations in Jersey just as we get our bearings. I'm just really particular with that source material, so we have a few cultivation partners in New Jersey, and I think I just move a little bit more quickly than a lot of my people on the ground in Jersey, but we have products hitting the shelves. We have products
Well,
hitting the shelves for sure, and
yeah,
they sell out, which is a good thing.
yeah, that is a good thing. I just noticed, like I said, I'm in the New York market, so I buy in the dispensaries here. So I've definitely noticed the past year
Beautiful.
how, yeah, the live resin rosin products are starting to show up in the edibles, more edibles. So yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, but I see how that
And I have a
market.
ton of clients in the New York market too. So, even though my brand isn't available in New York's dispensaries today, just really due to the, lack of maturity of the market and the reason I haven't launched in New York. But very soon you'll start to see essential extracts on the shelves in New York as well.
Okay.
Um, as of right now, I just have a lot of clients in New York. So I support
Yeah.
my clients out there. Definitely check out Urban Extracts and all the other companies that work under that umbrella out of the Urban Extracts lab, from
Oh, the
Oleo
urban.
to, I believe, Wana is out of that lab, and quite a few others.
Yeah, yeah. What do you mean clients that you're working with? Uh, you mean that are buying?
Well, Urban is owned by one of my best friends and clients. I helped get them off the ground, so I helped with the equipment, and then I helped train their staff. From training their in-house staff to also training a little bit of Oleo's staff, one of the companies that operates underneath that umbrella.
Oh, I've seen the Oleo product. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, they're from Colorado.
Originally, yes,
Oh, that's
yes,
great.
and also,
Wait, yeah.
like friends, relations, collab partners out here in Colorado. We initially did a collaboration in California together before Oleo was Oleo, before 710 Labs was 710 Labs, before Field Extracts was Field Extracts, and all of these homies were in a lab in Santa Cruz, where I kind of taught them a little bit of how I do things. We processed together, entered a cup in Los Angeles that year. This is 2012, and took home second place for the Skywalker 600 as a crew. And today, that crew has now pieced off into Essential Extracts, 710 Labs, Field Extracts, then sold to Glass House. Oleo is still operational, as you've seen.
Oh,
And so I think we started a little trend in that little warehouse in Santa Cruz.
oh, that's so cool. That's a cool story. I love that. Yeah, like it was just percolating there and well, I met them. I met some of the guys, I don't know who exactly, but at one of the at the Revelry show, I'm sure have you been?
You
Yeah.
might have even met one of their sales reps, who's also a Ganjier student of ours. So it's all just so intertwined. The industry is small, and it's why I really recommend keeping clear communication lines open, because you're going to probably run into a peer somewhere along the
Yeah,
lines.
I
You don't
did
mind
go.
if I smoke, do you?
No, no, go ahead.
All right.
Yeah, I was really impressed when I met them, so that's kind of cool. I don't know if you've heard about this, but I also was just at the NECAN show in New Jersey, and I met this
Mm.
extract guy who is using, and I just want to see if you have heard of it. It's called, they use an extraction process where they use a solvent, but he said it's cleaner than water, and it's called tetrafluorethane. Have you heard of that?
That sounds quite scary. And to be honest, in emerging markets and at expos, every single year there's somebody that comes out with some new canned solvent. M12, M32, I believe was like one of the ones back in the day. I see this and hear about this at every expo. And
Okay.
they're trying to make a quick sale, and I've never actually seen anybody operational with any of these lettered and numbered solvents that are going around. You know,
Okay.
it solvents can be very useful. They pull different polarities, etc. Um, and maybe this guy's found something he likes. The industry standard has really been, for quite some time now, I'd say butane, propane, ethanol, CO2, and solventless, kind of the main forms,
Yeah.
if you will. Really, I see them focused on emerging markets at expos, and I never see them past that. So that's
Okay.
just a trend I've seen for 20 years. 20 years I've
Oh,
seen that trend. Never
okay.
seen anybody actually come to market. And
Okay.
maybe they get hung up in testing phase. Maybe there's heavy metals in that can that they're distributing, or their tanks that they're distributing, and somewhere in their supply chain, um, it doesn't allow for the heavy regulated markets that we're in.
They got shut down for a little bit because it wasn't on the list of extract
Approved solvents, exactly.
approved
That's the
solvents.
one of the biggest issues, and that's one of the first things that'll hold you up. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like a lot of
Yeah.
pesticides are used in other industries, but they're not allowed in cannabis, if you will, due to the fact that they're not on that approved list.
Right, right. So that happened to them. So I also want, I'm always like digging into, what are some new, extraction type processes that people used or that they used a long time ago. And that's why I really wanted to ask your advice on this as well, is like static sifting or sifting
Yeah.
techniques. Can you tell me what that means? And is it a thing? Is it like something that they do in Europe and it's for hash making? Is that right?
They're doing
Sort
it all over the world. Let's
of.
go back in time a little bit, and I like to give credit to the people that have come before me. One of the gentlemen that really led the tech on static separation was Skunk Man Sam. Rest in peace. He's just recently passed. But for the longest time, he kept it under wraps, if you will. He didn't really spread that technique. It wasn't until, right before his passing that it really kind of hit the worldwide market, I'd say. There were starting to be murmurs probably in the last 10 years. And definitely people have been utilizing static technology to separate trichome heads from the rest of the plant material. So static separation, in essence, is you're first just getting a very crude dry sift, or keef, if you will, if that term is familiar with you, just the powder. And the keef, or the dry sift, is generally going to contain everything from trichome heads to trichome stalks to little bits of plant material. Now, how do you remove those trichome stalks and the little bits of plant material from this homogenized mixture? You use static. So on a crude level, people were utilizing static by way of a nitrile glove or a balloon, and they were charging the glove or charging the balloon by rubbing it, and then holding their hand or holding the balloon over that pile of trichome heads, trichome stalks, and plant material. and you're going to now separate, and the heads are going to be attracted, or stalks are attracted. I'm forgetting which one's attracted to the static. I apologize. It's
No,
not
no.
really my technique. It's not really what I've gone with.
Okay.
But basically, you're creating a static charge to separate the trichome heads from the plant material in the stalks. Now it's scaled up. And so now you have big machines like Sambo Creek created one of the first large scale scalable static separation machines. And then Ion Separations has now since, or maybe simultaneously. I don't know the logistics there, but they have a machine that's out of Europe as well. There's a few other machines that I've seen since then that are trying to scale this static technology. Um, I've been a big proponent of water. I think that we're able to retain more terpenes when we're processing whole plant fresh rosin. And it's doable to process whole plant fresh rosin into dry sieve, but you have to use, negative degree walk-in freezers to really pull that process. You're seeing negligible yields. It's not the most viable. It's more for like the extreme connoisseur. At price points, probably not viable in an emerging market, because in an emerging market, the consumer's not going to really know about that frozen sift product. So what's being scaled is this dry sift static method. And once you've kind of gotten to, as far as I'm concerned, once you've gotten to that dry sift section, you've already lost a lot of those volatile terpenes, thiols, esters, sulfur compounds, etc., and all the other compounds. And so for me, I'm trying to really retain the essence of that, like the initial plant terpenes. Excuse me. And it's harder to, for me anyways, to retain that initial essence without utilizing whole plant fresh frozen into water, into a freeze dryer. And that's kind of my technique these days.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I want to ask you about those low concentration molecules. I feel like everybody's talking about right now, but as far as scaling for your method and how you're going to scale the market and expand, is that hand like bubble hash process, or are you using machines, and how will you
I'd say,
scale, keep the
yeah, water
quality?
hash is a pretty synonymous term with bubble hash.
Yeah.
Um, solventless is kind of the umbrella. And yeah, in essence, that's what we do. We've scaled it up to definitely, as large as you'd like to go for the most part, depending on that initial washing process. So we have machines that go anywhere from 10 gallons all the way up to 300, 300-gallon machines. And there are larger, but I'd say 300 is kind of capping it for where I'd like to be while retaining quality. I'd say that you can scale a little bit larger with dry sieve, but you're starting to get into more of a crude process and less of the high quality, top tier market that I'm really focused on.
Yeah, I
I think
think
as
I've
there's a race to the bottom with the industry, there's going to be a flood of mid-grade products, and I will just always be on the top grade.
Yeah, wondering if you could do that and still keep that quality. I have seen those machines, those solventless machines, like they're those big barrels. So they're really just mixing it around just like you would if you were hand doing it. I guess it seems.
Yeah, yeah, we've really mimicked that hand wash style with a lot of the equipment that's available today.
So, I don't know if you've been
Scaled
hearing
it.
or you read that white paper that Abstract Tech just put out about the whole low concentration molecules. Is that, what do you think about that as far as how it supports terpenes or the entourage effect, but also, are they lost before you get to extraction, or is it something you can manipulate or enhance, express in extraction? Or what are you thinking about that whole white
These are all
paper?
great questions. Yeah, these are all great questions. And I think that we need to focus on other things other than just the terpenes, because yes, the term entourage effect, I think, was a good term to get people to understand. It's not really a term that I use too much today, because as we move forward and as we continue testing, we're realizing certain aspects of that entourage effect are really modulating other aspects, if you will. And really, the goal is to break down that entourage effect and understand which individual part of that entourage is attributing to what. So I think the entourage effect is a great intro and it's an umbrella we can use. But as we learn more and as things like that white paper come out, we can start to understand that, you know, other compounds are attributing to different effects. And I don't know if we're there yet. You know, we're
Yeah.
just on the cusp of understanding that side of things. On the assessment side, though, I'm learning that sulfur compounds are those ones that are going to pop all the way across the room. The second you open a jar of some sour diesel or something of that nature, the reason, or some skunk, the reason that it passes across the room so quickly is due to those sulfur compounds. And so I think I've been really focused a lot on that side of things. But as the research comes out, and I'm definitely a part of a lot of this research, because I'm in the lab actually creating to be able to go to the testing facilities and see what we're doing.
Right,
But it's
right.
all, it's all still new because as regulation comes into play, we were finally able to do this protected research. We weren't really able to do a lot of this research prior.
Right, right. I know. I'm really excited about, like, yeah, learning more about this. And then this kind of also brings me to the next topic, which is, I think, a big conversation is the the lack of cold chain supply from seed to sale. So it leaves the cultivation facility, it goes in a hot truck somewhere, gets delivered to the extraction or some,
Not
is that
always. And
okay?
really, we won't accept that. I have seen people try and deliver stuff in a cooler that doesn't have ice or things of that nature. Once it gets to the lab that I'm consulting for, that I'm doing a licensing deal with, I like open up the cooler. I'm like, oh no, this got to get sent right back, and I'll actually deny the delivery. So we always inspect all the packages. There does need to be cold chain supply. We, in different licensed entities that I've worked for, that I worked at, we have cold refrigeration trucks that we use for our deliveries. But it's a really important thing that you mentioned, not only for cultivation to lab, but from lab to retail and really how it sits in the retail is really important to discuss because there are products that are not as shelf stable. And those are the products that I haven't launched into these emerging markets because I want to see a refrigeration and a freezing unit front of house with my branding on it, which is going to be difficult for my sales guys to really get every single retail operation to be very uniform with that. Back in the day when ice cream was not regulated out and some of these other products, which have almost been regulated out of every emerging market. But back in the day, we did have branded freezers that were front of house. And now a lot of regulation and security issues have prevented that. And each market's different. So you're going to see a lack of consistency in that situation. So what I really promote doing specifically for those non-shelf stable products, for me, I think that fresh press rosin is a non-shelf stable product. It needs to be frozen from the time it leaves the press to the time it gets to that end consumer. Same thing with full melt hash, which is a subjective term. The freeze dried head, 6-star melt. There's so many different terms for that same type of product that's just the raw trichome heads alone. That product as well needs to be frozen from lab to final consumption. And for those two products specifically, I really won't launch them into a market. I won't have my clients launch them into a market unless we have a direct to consumer avenue. So in a lot of these markets, these new emerging markets, we do have that avenue. We have the ability to send it through a delivery company on dry ice. And so when I launched in California in 2019, that's what we were doing. We were working with Next Level Delivery. Unfortunately, I don't know if they're around anymore. But from the lab, we would send it on dry ice, or they would come pick it up from our lab. Then they would package it on dry ice in these cute little bags with these little like letters and stuff on them, and it was beautiful. Everything came on dry ice, direct to the consumer, and so that's what I really like to promote. If we're going to be talking about these non-shelf stable products, it's direct to consumer. It just has to be.
So in a new market like New Jersey, are you seeing that dispensaries are are using cold vaults in their for to store all their products, because nobody has them on the shelf. They do go back and get it in the vault. So because
Yep, in Jersey, I see most places that have built refrigeration and frozen storage in the vault, but then displaying and selling the product becomes quite difficult because it has to stay frozen the entire time. So maybe they have a sample out that's not frozen, but it's then going to start degrading on the shelf. Or
right,
maybe each time they pull a sample out of the freezer, and that's also going to attribute to degradation going in and out of that frozen chain.
yeah,
So both ways are not going to be suitable for
yeah,
representing the end product the way that the hash maker wants to represent it. And that's why
right.
I really won't release those products, those non-stable, non-shelf stable products in emerging markets like New Jersey.
Yeah, I was quizzing a bunch of retailers when I was at the NECAN show recently, just to see if they are using it, and they said, well, it's the law that they have to have refrigerated vault,
Yep.
but they said some of them aren't even putting the temperature where it needs to be, because probably it's just too cold. So even though they have the law, where is that temperature supposed to be? Is it supposed to be below 60? I was just talking to someone about this, a lab, SC,
And on the product.
Alec Dixon from,
Alec is great, great dude, good friend.
yeah.
Love
So
Alec.
he's the one who kind of was talking about that need for cold chain supply. So
Yeah,
that's what got me really going on this.
it is neat because we're losing so much of that market because there's lack of direct to consumer, and hash makers like us will not sacrifice the quality to the end user. So we just haven't released those products,
Yeah,
which sucks for the
and
consumer in new markets.
and flour
And
too.
there's lower grade products that are being released in a similar fashion, but once you get to lower grade, they are shelf stable. In that lower, like traditional hash grade, it's shelf stable at that point. And I haven't even released that product because I'd like to release the higher grade version first and then offer a lower price point for a more shelf stable product. So I just have a method to the madness, and the market's not there yet. And Alex, right, the
Yeah,
supply chain's not there yet. The direct consumer is not there yet in New Jersey. That's when I really don't even want to rely on cold supply chain unless it's my own. So I want to
yeah.
go direct to consumer if I'm going to do unstable products.
Yeah, yeah. But also even flour, that's what Alec was talking about. You're just losing the flour, you're losing all the value, degrade,
Yeah.
it's all degrading. And then another thing I just heard somebody talking about recently is blending strains and concentrates. Is that something
Yep.
okay?
I've called it artistic blends. I've done it
Okay.
since day one. When we
Oh,
started processing material that wasn't really meant for hash back in the day, everyone was just growing for flour, and then the byproduct was, used for hash, if you will. So initially, we were getting a ton of cultivars that weren't really the most viable. Blue Dream being a good example of a old world cultivar today. In today's, it's not really an old world, but we don't see too much of it today. We do in emerging markets, but I don't see too much of it. Sorry, I'm
mhm.
going to keep rambling. But Blue Dream back in the day wasn't the best washer. It didn't yield very well for us. It was a lot drier, but it did have this very floral, amazing aroma that attracted people. And the color was always nice and light. Bubba Kush was harder to, manipulate. It was a lot more greasy, and this is another like older cultivar that we don't see too much of today. It did yield a little bit better than the Blue Dream. It still wasn't a banger by any means, but it was real greasy and unstable, and it had a very earthy tone and was kind of monoterpene earthy. It didn't have too much else going on. A little earth, a little soil, a little coffee, but it wasn't too piercing. The Blue Dream was a little bit more piercing. So we would combine those two in the wash, and we would create Blue Bubba. And at that time too, Blue Dream was pretty saturated. So, not everyone wanted Blue Dream. So coming out with an artistic blend of something that really worked well together, created the Bubba Kush, made the Bubba Kush a little bit more stable, made the Blue Dream a little bit more oily, if you will, because Blue Dream was really dry. And it created an end product that sold better than both our Bubba or our Blue Dream. We dubbed it Blue Bubba.
So
And
you're going on
things
flavor.
like that. Those, yeah, flavor and consistencies, as well as viability. I think we had a ton of Blue Dream material, and Blue Dream wasn't selling, so we would blend it to create an artistic blend. Is what we called it, and people still do that today. They make blends either in the wash, or sometimes now they're washing everything alone, individual cultivars. They then freeze dry that hash. It goes into a freezer as long-term storage. And then they can go into this freezer and they can be like, okay, I want to mix some of this papaya with some of this sour garlic cookies or whatever it may be, and create my own sour papaya. And you can now do things of that nature as well. It gets a little confusing, maybe even convoluted to an end consumer. They're like, oh, wait, is this the sour papaya that was bred by such and
Well,
such? No,
yeah,
this is actually an artistic blend that was blended after the water, and it gets into a lot of explaining, but some people choose not to explain it. Some people are like, it is what it is.
if you
And
feel
some
good,
hash
you feel.
makers are extremely open to, sharing what is in their artistic blend.
Okay. And then I just met someone recently who's doing it with, with dry herbs. So they're doing pre-rolls, and they're doing it not for flavor, but for cannabinoid. Like, okay, this strain expresses, CBN more. So that's, so I hadn't heard
Yeah.
of it, but I thought that was kind of interesting. But maybe it's been around longer. I hadn't heard of it before. And then how do you feel also about, I've heard a couple people saying that they're worried as far as cultivation, that we're getting away from long flowering, like the short flowering, is
Yeah.
we're losing those land race strains, or ones that have been really around. And also, not only that, but it doesn't give the growers enough time to really work the plant to get all these like low concentration um
Yeah,
molecules.
depending on the cultivar, different representations will occur earlier if you pull early, and different ones will come out if you pull later. And so, yeah, you might not be seeing the full potential if you're harvesting on a certain day for every cultivar, which most commercial facilities that I've toured have a harvest date set. Some of them, in fact, quite a few of them in Jersey, including some of my cultivation partners, have multiple dates. So certain cultivars, they are going to extend. Certain cultivars are going to pull a little bit earlier, maybe for concentrates and for that color, if you will. Because now as concentrates become more and more saturated, the end consumer is oftentimes not able to smell a product. They can just look at a product. And so they're going to go with the lighter color, although color might be subjective in most worlds, unless you're talking like green or black. These things are
So,
off colors, off consistencies.
so I'm sure anyone who's listening to this would want to hear maybe how you select your cultivar, or your cultivars, or how you think about that.
I do a ton of R&D myself. So I have an R&D facility in Colorado. It's just where I really focus on cultivar selection. So I'll pop generally like 2 to 3 strains every couple of years. It's hard for me to handle more than that. I do a lot of touring and I'm on the road a ton. So it's generally what I'm trying to do. So where I'm selecting from friends' breeding projects, and I'm selecting specific phenotypical expressions, whether that be for dry cured flower or whether that be for water hash or rosin or another end product. I'm really selecting in the beginning for that end product. So I'll do selections for dry cure flower, like I did this Zodi selection recently, where I popped some seeds from aficionado seeds, and I found two phenos. I finally narrowed it down to one pheno. It was hard for me to kill off the sister pheno.
Uh-huh.
I narrowed it down to one selection that I really enjoy in flower. It has the greasy nature that I look for a dry cured flower. It has the structure that I was looking for. It saw the viability and yield. It hit all the points. And really, I guess first and foremost is the terpenes. I'm first smelling it. I'm looking for something in a Zodi. The lineage is Zerbert times Gotti. Zerbert's Skittles times Sherbert, and Gotti is Biscotti times an OG, I believe. I'm spacing which OG, maybe King Louis OG. And together, combined, I was looking for something for dry cured flower purposes that exhibited some of that floral nature from the sherbet, some of the candy from the Skittles, and some of that eucalyptal creamy gas from the biscotti. And I really, really like that creamy gas eucalyptal terpene right now. So I was looking for something on that hunt and leaned a little bit more on that, but still retained hints of the candy and the sherb. And I found it. Found exactly what I was looking for, which is cool and it's rare. It doesn't always happen like that. That same hunt that I did last year, I also popped a pack of seeds from DNA Genetics, and I was looking for something that washes for this selection. So on the other side of things, I was looking for something that I could put out in a cold cure rosin form. And I selected a honey banana times Skittles that yielded really well in the biomass side of things, in the cultivation. You're looking at how well the biomass yields, how easy it is to grow, the structure of that plant, all the things added up. I think I had 5 phenos of the honey banana Skittles. I had one pheno that did more biomass than the one that I ended up keeping, but its structure was difficult. The veg was more difficult on that phenotypical expression. So I went with the one that had a better structure, that had more tops. And it ended up having the grittiest texture. When I'm looking at tactile sensation, I go into my garden when I'm selecting for a washer. I go in about 2 weeks before harvest, maybe 3 weeks before harvest, and I'm grabbing one close leaf and I'm feeling what the trichomes feel like in between my fingers. And I'm looking for something on the washing side that has a gritty sand-like texture that also tends to have a sticky, tacky feeling and maybe even a little grease. Because that sticky, tacky feeling is going to really attribute to some of those volatile compounds I'm aiming towards, anyways. That greasy feeling is going to really allocate towards something that's going to stay almost non-stable and sit in a puddle of terpenes on a visual level and be very aromatic on a testing level and a aromatic assessment level as well. And so I'm looking at a bunch of things when I'm feeling that tactile sensation. But overall, if I want to see viability, it's got to have a little bit of that grit or that tacky sensation. If it doesn't have either of those, it's generally not going to be viable for the wash. Maybe it's viable for dry cured flour. But I was hunting that honey banana Skittles for something to wash, and I found something that's gritty, tacky. Doesn't have too much grease on this one, but gritty and tacky is good enough for this. And I'm seeing about 4 to 5.5% yields on it, which makes it extremely viable. And it really has the terpene that I was looking for. And it came out having this real candy forward, creamy, with a hint of this cheese. And I was looking for the candy and the cream. The cheese was a little bonus.
Wow, I
That's
tell you,
how I select when it comes to seed selections. Also, clones that I've had in the stable for over 20 years that are just for smoking dry cured flour. I wouldn't really wash too many of them. They're not known for that. Every once in a while, I'll freeze some and wash because it's a treat, if you will. But they're generally not the most viable. And then I've selected over the years that people have gifted to me, that I purchased, that are known for washing, yield data behind them, where not only me, my crew have washed the same material and seen the same high viability, 6% yield from whole plant fresh frozen to finished product. And that's a really, really high yield if we're talking fresh frozen numbers. And so I have a list of washers in my stable that are 6%ers, if you will,
Wow. Listening to you,
that I didn't
like,
have to hunt from seed, that were just gifted or sold.
wow. Listening to you talk is like why I feel like we need to really be in touch with people like you who have been in the industry and, working this for so long. I mean, when I think about these MSOs or, setting up these commercial grows and things like that, I just feel like they all should have someone like your experience in there, just because it's just
I
such a,
appreciate that. That's a real premise of why we started the Ganjier program. We started a program initially, it was kind of birthed in Southern California, or combination of the idea was birthed. We launched it out of one of the cookies facilities in Northern California off of Highway 101. And now for the last 4 years, we've been operating this program out off of our own campus in Southern Humboldt. And one of our initial goals was to put educated people out into the industry that can fulfill these roles of a ganjier, very much like a sommelier in the wine industry. But we are putting ganjiers in the front of house, in the back house, sales, distribution, wholesale, you name it. And at this point, there's ganjiers throughout the entire world, if not every continent. We have trained educators, if you will, and I'm really proud of the program that we've created. It's been tough lately, as the entire industry has been struggling financially. Um, Less and less people that are wanting to spend money on education. But we're still up there. We've got one more session this year, Southern Humboldt County, California, and we do these in-person training sessions. The students start with a lot of an online course, and that online course can take students anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of years to really study. And the online course goes over everything from cultivation to the law to retail, customer interaction protocols. Really, it covers the entire lab processing. It covers the entire gambit of the industry, the online portion. And then once they get up into the in-person training, it's 2 days. The first day is an assessment portion for students, where we teach students to utilize our app, the Systematic Assessment Protocol app, the SAP app, that we've created over the years and continue to modify as the industry evolves. And that app is used to assess flower, concentrate, and now even edibles, and pre-rolls. And that app is going to devise a number, very much like you will see a number on a wine bottle. And we're very transparent with how we come up with that number, whereas wine is not. So the Robert Parker rating scale is kind of just a number, and you don't really understand why that number is associated with that bottle of wine. We try and be transparent. We give like a breakdown of aroma, appearance, flavor, experience. And after that first day of understanding the SAP and the protocol and learning to assess cannabis, because that was really a lacking situation, I felt like, in the industry. What is quality? That's what we're trying to teach people, what quality is. And day two, we do a farm tour. So a lot of people are coming from all over the world where they've never actually seen a growing live cannabis plant, and they get introduced to quite a few of those on our farm tour. And I think that's a great experience as well. And then we finish off that day with some concentrate assessments, some more focus on the customer interaction protocol, so front of house, and then generally ended even talking about edibles and how we are assessing edibles.
oh, that's cool. I didn't know that you were part of the Ganjier program. So you're one of the original founders of that? Oh,
I
that's so
am.
cool.
I'm one of the counselors, as we call it, and I'm also, full-time teacher with Ganjier. I've been
Oh
for the
my
last
God.
5, maybe 6 years. I've been,
Oh,
teaching every single month that we're operational, which is Generally about 6, 7 months here.
Yeah, I've had that on my radar. I always think, oh, if I had time, I really want to take that program. Anyway,
Sorry, I
but
just plugged the program right there, but it felt like it was the right
perfect.
timing.
Yeah, it was perfect timing. No, I really, I wanted to kind of, focus on it because I think it's a really important program. And I heard somebody else talk about it too, but I also interviewed Kevin Jodry and he spoke about it a little bit. Um,
He's yes, he's also a council member, and he created the term. Really, his son, I think it was Nakona, created the term
oh, Ganjier, you
Ganjier.
mean?
Initially
Or
calling Kevin a Ganjier. Yeah, Ganjier. Very much like sommelier, so we pronounce it
yeah,
the French pronunciation.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, the term really came from Kevin, and then Kevin brought the term into, the bigger picture of the program. But yeah, Kevin's the OG.
But anyway, but another question is yeah, I want to look into that program more. One day I really want to do it. Um, what is the thing that drives you the most crazy about what extractors are doing that you see?
Ooh.
Like,
I'm really OCD. I'm really particular, and I can't stress cleanliness enough, and sterilization, and trying to create methods to eliminate cross contamination. So when I see a hash maker or I go into a lab that's dirty, that's a big pet peeve of mine. When I see a hash maker fill in bags to go then press, and he's laying them on top of a dirty countertop, and dirty can even be in the hash world. It could mean that there's trichomes on the counter, but they're about to go press this into rosin, which is a completely separate product and process. But maybe you've got some of these loose trichomes on the outside of this bag. You then go press this bag that's filled with trichomes, and the good stuff that you want extrudes out of this bag. But now, flowing with that good stuff, you've got some of these raw trichomes that didn't get extruded. So they still contain this waxy cuticle. If you're familiar with the trichome structure, we're generally looking at a stalk, which we generally don't want as extractors. It's got a lot of lipids in it. Then we have the trichome head. And if you're just a consumer looking at flower or looking at cannabis that you're about to consume, and you see that sparkling nature happening, those disco balls shining back at you, those are the trichomes I'm speaking about. And the reason that they're reflective is because that's where a lot of the oils are contained, is in that trichome head. Those are the things that we want. And the process of water hash to rosin is removing that waxy cuticle on the outside of this trichome head, just releasing those oils and those volatile compounds, the things that we want from inside that trichome head. And that's why we're able to retain a lot of those volatile compounds that we were speaking of before, because they're kind of trapped in this waxy cuticle that protects everything inside until we've extruded it. But getting back to the OCD issue, now you've got trichomes extruding mixed with trichomes that haven't extruded, so it still has that waxy cuticle. And once it gets into a final form, you might be dabbing or vaporizing this product, and you see a little bit of residue in your banger. That's because that waxy cuticle wasn't removed. It oxidizes faster. It might leave a little bit of that plant material char, if you will, and you get into some QC issues. And so that's one of the first things that I kind of notice is in a lab, things that bug me, if you will, is cross contamination or lack of sterility or cleanliness that would follow through to an issue such as the issue I described.
Right. And then what I've seen really interesting that you're doing, but I don't know much about it, is your high tea. What is that?
Yeah.
That looks so
It's a
cool.
really niche production. I've been producing events. I'm also a DJ, an MC, an event production manager, a host. I've done a lot in the event space, and promo and marketing. I think I started really on the ground level as a kid doing flyers on the streets and hitting
Mm.
cars and hitting clubs with flyers, eventually moving up in that company where I was telling the younger generation which clubs to hit with which flyers. And I think from a street level, I learned marketing, street marketing, really. And I've now taken that into the digital media world and utilized social media over the last 2 decades to get my point across rather
Mhm.
than doing it by hand flyers. But I still do hand flyers. I still print handbills today, and I'll hit venues with handbills. Anyways, I started doing high tea because a buddy of mine, Eric, I'm just going to get into the story real quick. I was DJing at an ego clash in Northern California, and it was cold and rainy, but I was protected underneath really foggy, I guess, not rainy, but I was protected underneath a greenhouse with some glass blowers kind of heating up the space. And I was DJing in the greenhouse that year. And it was a great vibe. And I DJed for like 5 or 6 hours. Towards the end of the night, when everyone's wrapping up, I started playing a lot more like earthy, toned roots and amapiano and down tempo music and just kind of bringing the vibes more grounding. And at that same time, my buddy Eric started serving pu'er tea in a traditional gong fu cha method where he's pouring over and he's giving some back to the tea pet and to those that have come before us. And he had this ritual.
Oh.
He pours me a glass of tea, a little cup of tea, while I'm DJing. This is one of my first experiences, not my first experience, but one of the first experiences with gong fu cha style of preparation and serving while I was smoking a hash spliff and DJing. And just all of this energy combined, I took a sip of this very earthy tasting pu'er with this gassy OG hash spliff, and the combinations in my mouth, as well as the feelings that I got while I was DJing, and I think everyone else that was consuming cannabis and drinking tea felt this feeling of this grounding and this coming to a close and almost a celebratory grounding. And that's what I wanted to replicate. And so that's what really incited high tea, where we more intentionally pair specific types of pu'er tea with specific types of traditional hashish. And I really wanted to bring attention back on traditional hashish. I think it helps the farmers, it helps the traditional hash makers, it helps a lot of the local communities. And that's really why we started it in Humboldt, to show love back to these traditional hash makers and kind of bring that back to the forefront. And I think it's helped. When I'm talking about traditional hash, I'm talking about more of like hand rubbed style or more of a dry sift style that's then pressed.
Those rock, yeah,
More of
those.
an old world style that came from Morocco or Afghanistan or India. And we try and replicate really those old world styles of traditional hash making. And we like to highlight traditional hash makers. They're known for this process. As well as we like to highlight the flavors, those combinations. And so we did it for a couple years in Humboldt, and it went well, and it was as I pictured. And now we're kind of pivoting as Humboldt is really just struggling. A lot of businesses are struggling in Humboldt right now and in Northern California in general.
Makes me
And
sad.
so we're pivoting and we're moving the event this year, anyways, to Miami, where we're going to be holding High Tea Miami inside of a wine bar during Art Basel Week in the Wynwood Art District, which is like the heart of Art Basel and the heart of the art community in general. So it's just all really lined up for us to bring the event over there. We're also going to bring in a little bit of wine pairing with all three of them, just to kind of keep everything lively. This event will start a little bit later. It'll be from 6 p.m. until 2 a.m. Whereas in the past, high tea has really, started at noon and gone till about 7 or 8 p.m. We're going a little bit more with the Miami nightlife and a little bit of a fusion with high tea. Yeah, we have a
I love
local
that.
tea server that's, he has his own style, but it's very fitting with what I want to represent. He's also a DJ like I am. And it's going to be an amazing,
Wow.
amazing session this year.
So are you going to pair it with hash? Does everybody get like something to smoke
Yeah.
and the
In
tea?
the past, what we've done is we've given everyone a 3-hole bowl, which is also a device to vaporize traditional hash alone without having to use flowers or without having to roll a joint. And so we placed the first pairing sample inside that 3-hole bowl and kind of delivered it on a platter as they're drinking tea to make it very fluid for them. I didn't want to have people like reaching into their bag and getting a rig or doing anything. I wanted to really make it fluid. They're already drinking this session of tea, and the gentleman's going to be pouring that session for probably an hour or two, that same type of tea, so it can really go around the room. And at the same time, we'll be coming around with a platter that has the 3-hole bowl, that has your hot roll rod, and even a torch. The torch sometimes comes in the goodie bag, so they have that on them. Sometimes it'll come on the platter, but just really making it fluid so that they can assess that hash at the same time that they're drinking the tea and get the feelings combined, because hash can oftentimes be very grounding and calming and can even make people tired, whereas the black teas are going to be very uplifting, so it's going to be a nice balance in the affect as well as the flavor is a huge point. Plus we talk about the history, how the tea leaves were stored, how they were transplanted, very much like how the cannabis was stored and transplanted. So there's a lot of similarities, how they were cultivated, talk about, and on the wine side too. So I get really, really high talking about the wine, the tea, and the
I
cannabis and
know.
how they all intertwine.
Yeah, they all intertwine. I mean, if you talk to anybody who's been around for a long time, like, in cultivation and extraction, I feel like they have a real keen interest in wine. They're involved in wine somehow, or you know what I mean? They're studying it. Everybody, anyone I talk to, like all you guys,
That's what's up.
and
I,
hops, they're
I've
looking
been
at
a big, oh yeah.
in the
I
hops.
I feel like I started probably with beer. I don't really drink too much liquor at all these days, really at all. I probably started with beers, and I got into the sours and then the heavily fruited sours, and I noticed I was gaining weight, to be honest,
Oh,
drinking that much like fruit and fermented fruit and sugar.
oh, yeah,
And
yeah,
then I think that's what really pushed my pivot probably 10 years ago or 8 years ago, more into wine. It just felt healthier for me.
yeah.
I'm not a big drinker, but I'll drink a glass of wine at dinner if I'm going out, glass or two. Sometimes I'll have a glass with the dinner and then maybe a dessert wine or something for the dessert. Because I like
Yeah,
flavors.
yeah.
And recently I just passed my level 1 sommelier, because we've been teaching a lot of the similar terminology. Really, with Ganjier, we replicated the sommelier program, and then some. I'd say that the Ganjier program is a lot more rigorous than sommelier so far, but I'm only on level 1 and I definitely would like to continue. So I believe this winter I'm going to be doing my level 2 training, and it's like kind of an expedited course in Sonoma. But yeah, recently got my level 1 because I felt like I wanted that knowledge behind me, nothing more than I just wanted to understand the terminology, where a lot of the terminology we use came from, and I wanted to be able to talk about the similarities and the cultivation methods and flavors and the tannins, and
Yeah,
there's different things when we're talking about wine than weed. And oftentimes I'm seeing cannabis assessment platforms that are just coming to market that have really 100% copied wine, and it's like, is it dry, and like things that wouldn't really have to do with cannabis are still terms that I'm seeing, and I'm like, no, let's cross that out. That's not, we're not talking about tannins when we're talking about cannabis necessarily.
yeah. Oh, wow. I know. I see the parallel for sure. I mean, there's a lot of crossover and intertwining. So, the last question is, I'm actually also writing an article about this. I'd love to grab a quote from you. Uh, I'm writing an article about, what it takes to win a cannabis cup.
Okay.
I had actually interviewed Alec on his, that was why I was talking to him also about, the different categories. So he judges flower, and I haven't
Mhm.
talked to anyone on concentrates, but I I guess is if somebody was entering it, or how you look at it when you're thinking about entering a cup, what is it that you start thinking about?
Some of the first things that I start thinking about in all reality are what are the flavors that are winning. I think it's a great place to start. You're seeing things like Skittles sweep ups all last year and even into this year. Skittles, and really, like, you saw that clone only Skittles. You didn't see a lot of the Skittles crosses doing the same thing. If you had that clone only Skittles cut and you processed it into amazing rosin and you entered it in a cup, you had a high likelihood of doing well. So I
Mhm.
think that that's the really the first place you should start. The smart place to start is look at the recent past and see what's winning. And then really you got to look at your judges panel too. If you really want to be, on top of entering these cups, look at your judges panel, see what type of terps they've been rating highly, see what type of terps they like. Get into these people's heads, really. And then I would be going to these events, go to the cups, go to the events before you even start entering these cups, and start to understand the crew, start opening these 2 gram buckets that are being passed around at all these, and see what's hype. I think that right now a lot of the tropical flavors, granted I just came from Hawaii, but a lot of these like flavors that are grown in these tropical climates are exhibiting different, compounds, if you will. And now we're starting to see, really, it's about the terroir. We're going back to the terroir. So you're starting to see different regions that are producing hash, but their terroir is completely different, from humid to dry to everything in between. Whereas back in the day, we really just saw hash coming from dry, high altitude climates, and then the flowers grown in the equatorial regions, and there was this separation. And now we're seeing little combination. So we're really getting into some new compounds, some new terpenes, some new sulfurs, some new thiols that we really weren't able to hone in on previously due to these. I'd say a lot of it's the terroir.
Well, so for concentrates, then, I guess, like when you have however many selections that you have, like where do you just knock it off the table and go, no, forget it? I'm just, when you start narrowing it down,
Oh,
like you're looking at.
I will still taste everything.
Okay.
I'm big on, making sure that I sample every single thing in the kit. But you start to notice some outliers. You start noticing ones that have uneven consistencies. Maybe it's a little crusty. Maybe it looks a little older. Consistency's off. Maybe the color's off. Maybe the smell is putrid, or it's got some like chlorine smell to it. And I'm like being able to name cleansing solutions or something in the aromas, or pesticides, even worse. Oh yeah, I start to, but I'll still taste those, and I think it's probably why my throat's a little bit like this right now, because I definitely smoked one where I smelled it and I'm like, this is off. This is something that was sprayed, or something that's in the nutrients that was over pumped that they didn't flush out. There's something wrong with this smell, and I still tried it, and it was harsh. It left more residue on everything added up to there being an issue with that sample, but I still rated it. Still assessed it, rated it very low. People should know.
Do you see a consistency in winners? Like, is there something?
Especially on the international market, because there's hash makers that'll travel to all these different international cups throughout the world. And there's little circuits, little hot pockets, little hype circuits, if you will. So I do see some consistency there. And you start seeing consistency in the different state ran operations. But a lot of them are turning over. High Times used to be one of the bigger ones, and it's not really happening right now. There's a transition happening. We might see more cups from High Times. Definitely more education is coming from High Times.
Right, but and how about strains? Like, do you see like strains or
Yeah, as I mentioned, the Skittles,
the
is
Skittles.
trending,
Okay.
and then yeah, terpenes are trend. I think lime is kind of the new hot one right now. So yeah, look out for lime terps.
Okay. No, this is great. Thank you. As a matter of
Lime's
fact,
been hot. It's just
Yeah.
re-emerging as hot. People circle in the terp trend, so people are kind of going back to a lot of the old school cultivars. People want my UK cheese, they want the OGs, they want some of these older cultivars, these skunk crosses like pure guava and papaya and stuff.
Interesting. I've never been to a cup.
I'd say if you want to write about them, I would say just hop into one because it's going to change your perspective. Like definitely go to like one of these Eddie happening type of events. I think that's actually the name of one of these cups. But
where?
yeah,
What?
I would
In New York. Where would you? I'm in New York City.
I would try and get your way into Masters of Rosin. They've been partnering with the Astor Club, I believe. It'll come around next year. I think it's already happened this year. Maybe I could be wrong.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, check out that one. I helped start it. I was the MC and a judge for it for the first 4 years, I believe, in Barcelona. And David, the owner of HQ, is kind of taken over that role, and he's now touring that event like I'm touring High Tea, and it's I'd say it's one of the more recognized events, especially when it comes to New York.
Okay, I'm going to definitely check that out. I would love to.
And hit them up and say you're a writer, and ask for your because I don't know if they have too many people writing about it. I mean, but yeah.
Yeah, I would love to write about it, attend and kind of do that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Look into the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nick.
Of course.